Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Automotive Management for this month's AM webinar. The topic this time is taking the dealer workforce through change. I'm AIM's editor, Tim Rose, and this webinar is kindly sponsored by Autoflows. Thank you for their support. So I'm joined today by some very experienced industry executives. They are John O'Hanlon, the Chief Exec of Waylands Automotive, Sarah Sillers, who has been recently announced again as interim chief exec of the IMI, Kerry Thompson, founder and director of Akeno, which has worked with OEMs and organisations on various change management programs, new store concepts, omnichannel retailing, etc. And Axel Graeser, commercial manager for the UK at Autoflows. So before we start the discussion, I always like to remind you that you can join us with your comments and your questions. There's a Q&A tab on your screen which you can type into. Please do that, and we will hopefully get some time towards the end to cover a few of your questions. So, panelists, talking about taking the dealer workforce through change, we've had, in my 20 years on AM, we've had digitalization of the industry. We've had business models being changed and tried, agency. We've got Chinese brands coming in and disrupting some of the traditional players in the market. So I'm interested in hearing from each of you in turn. Really, perhaps we start with Kerry. As business leaders and advisors, what strategies and techniques can be used when implementing and managing change in businesses?
Sure, thanks, Tim. So for this, I would say it's all about starting by building clarity. As you say, there's been an awful lot going on recently, and there always is some hot potato topics of the day. So for me, it's really about building that clarity with the team. And that's around, for me, strategy means nothing if no one understands it. So really it's about working to create a shared, very plain English picture of what's changing, but importantly, why it's changing and how people will be affected. So in reality, what that means is about prioritizing visibility and accountability. So, who's doing what by when, and what are the success measures? How do we know if it's working? And really about removing ambiguity and building trust. And I suppose how finally for me, it's about focusing on the execution, so not just the design. So you can have the most brilliant plan, and don't get me wrong, I love a fantastic plan. But it can be badly executed. So you can take the best idea, you can create the best plan, but for me, it's all about the execution of that plan. And for us, we use the concept of transformation sprints. So it's a classic, eating an elephant one bite at a time. So if you present the elephant to people, it all looks a bit big, but just to break it down, and really what that does really is accelerates the decision making and alignment, but also ensures progress is fast and focused. Demonstrate the wins before moving on to the next phase.
Okay, because psychologically, a lot of people react quite. We're not naturally kind of geared up to accept change, are we? We like stability, and actually breaking it down into those sprints there is a way of managing that process for them.
Yeah, and it's also, for me, you're absolutely right, having that. And often people don't like change because of fear. It's not that necessarily they don't want to change, but it's the fear of the unknown, which is why I say understanding what the vision is, understanding the strategy to achieve that vision, but breaking it down into the operational tactics. And Tim, here's how it's going to affect you, and here's what I need from you. Here's your part in the change. Here's why it's important, and just building that whole picture for every level within the stakeholder group within an organisation.
Absolutely. Sarah, coming to you next. In your experience, what are the kind of key strategies and techniques for managing change? Obviously, at the IMI, you're an organisation which has people at the heart of it, and skills development and leadership. So I'm interested in your views there.
Well, I would agree with absolutely everything Kerry has said, but with my sort of people hat on from the IMI's kind of concern around the workforce and how people kind of manage that. I think one of the things I would say is that we used to talk about change as almost an isolated event. We would take a project and we would deal with it, and hopefully it would be handled in that sort of style that Kerry's outlined, with a kind of feedback loop all the way through it. You know, are we on track? Is it delivering what we want? Stop, start, where are we? But I think the difference, Tim, that I've noticed over the last few years is that this isn't about necessarily a change program in one area of the business. It used to be, we'll go and do X, we'll go and do an exercise on our IT, or we'll go and look at our commercial sales strategy or something. But now every business I'm looking at, we are seeing multiple change programs going on concurrently. And I think one of the biggest things is making sure that the strategy and techniques ensure that you have an awareness and a real handle on how the changes are affecting other areas of the business at the same time. So if you're looking at, say, a new way of conducting sales, omnichannel, you're looking at digitalization, you're looking at the use of AI in the business, you're looking about changing working practices because of the way staff want to be managed, or their domestic circumstances. I personally think you've got to have a mind to have a whole plan of what change is impacting other things. And I think it's made change management much more complicated in businesses generally.
I guess on that, Sarah, then that requires real focus from everyone in the board, in the senior management team, to ensure that all the different functions across the business are as you say, kind of taken account of with that.
Yes, I think one of the challenges, Tim, is the bandwidth of the team and the capability you have within the business, because there are plenty of experts out there that can come in and support a business as external resource. But you've then got the cost implications. What's the return on investment of making the change? And I think one major overlooked area, and I think some of businesses recently have kind of realised that they haven't actually worked out what the longevity of the change is going to be. And therefore, you know, there's a huge cost impact to this, which is whether, you know, the change programs are capitalised, not capitalised, whether it's actually, will we survive as a business if we don't make these changes? So I think there has to be a very clear vision and mapping process of what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And John, coming to you next. So in terms of your background, obviously you were a senior leader at Ridgeway and worked with David Newman building that business before it was sold, and then you've came back with Waylands, and you've been building that in fairly rapid fashion, I would say, with the support of some key brands there. So I'm interested in your perspective of how you've managed that.
Well, obviously, I would say that we do everything that Kerry and Sarah has outlined. I think, in fairness, we did learn a lot of lessons from Ridgeway, because we went from that, because people see what we ended up with Ridgeway. They didn't see the two-site 13 million turnover business that became the 800 million 35-site business. So there was a lot of learnings for us on the way. And I think some of it, you know, you go right back to the very foundations of what you're doing in business. And there's so much change, you know, change is now the new norm of everything that we do. And I guess I keep looking for what are the reasons for the change. And then does that change fit with our strategy? So actually having a strategy that everyone understands is so important. And every bit of correspondence that we send out, every meeting we start with, we always go back to that Waylands vision, those Waylands values, and then we can measure what the change looks like and what it should do. And having that culture that actually accepts change, because you're right, nobody likes it, and there's always that challenge. But if you've got a culture that actually we're embracing it, And, you know, you mentioned agency. That could have been a huge blow to the business in terms of how we sell cars to customers. But by having an effective approach to that, then we were able to, you know, to deal with the change and come out successfully out the other side. Resourcing properly, that is huge. Is one of the lessons where we tried to get by early with Ridgeway. And actually, you need the people, because what you don't want is the rest of the business wobbling as you're doing change. So actually, whether it's internal or external, you need the right levels of resource to deliver that change. And the last part is just communicating. You know, communicating isn't saying, here's a plan, that mountain, we're going to climb it. It's actually saying, okay, this is how we're going to climb the mountain. So rather like eating the elephant in little pieces, it's actually, we go to base camp, and then from base camp, we go to the next stage, and then telling them how we're doing. So even if we don't get it right, then we go back to the team and say, we didn't get it right, and this is how we fix it. So I think there's a lot of learnings in there, and it's hard to, you know, it's hard to describe a culture, but if you can get that culture, becomes the winning culture, we take on change and we deliver on it, then you're in a good place.
It takes a while to develop that culture, though, doesn't it, John? It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
And you know, we've been lucky. We've got a few ex Ridgeway guys have joined us, which is super. But you know, I think when people arrive and they begin to enjoy it, so again, some of the strongest members of the team are not Ridgeway either, and that's been the joy. We're now creating a Waylands culture, which doesn't feel too different, but it is different, and that's the part that, again, more difficult to explain, but it means that we can do things quicker and achieve more successfully.
Fantastic, thank you, John. Axel, on to you. In a business, obviously working in the tech sector, supporting motor retailers, if they can't possibly a faster moving sector in any industry, can there?
I think my experience has been that automotive can be quite slow and definitely resistant to change compared to maybe some of the other industries. But I think once it is embraced, it's properly embraced, right? And I think there's something about automotive, you know, the cultures here that the people build, they are very responsive and they work well together. And I think that's kind of the most important thing, is you do need this buy-in. And I think great management teams in automotive, across dealership groups, OEMs, they realize that they need the buy-in from the operational people, the people doing it every day. And often that just gets forgotten, right? That you have people who are at the dealership every day and they need to enact essentially what you decided as a change. And I think once you have that buy-in, then it's a lot more effective, a lot more smooth.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Kerry, coming to you next, talking the people in particular, what are the key factors to consider when you're guiding the workforce through a significant change? I mean, you talked about kind of breaking it down into those sprints, and actually that must be a key aspect of getting their buy-in, as Axel says, and ensuring you can deliver.
Absolutely. And for me, is with lots of transformation and change that goes on in any business, but especially in automotive, often the expectation is you start with tech. We found a new tool or a new toy, and we're gonna implement it, you know, and that's the starting point. Whereas actually for me, with any program, and even if it is a heavily tech program, it's actually don't start with the tech, start with the people. And back to that idea of understanding the change, as John said, not just there's your mountain, let's get climbing. It's here's how we're going to climb it, how we're going to climb it together as leaders, how we're going to lead the way in terms of climbing that mountain. And really having those people to get that genuine buy-in, first of all, before you even start talking about the implementation of what the solution and maybe the tech's going to be. And as we've heard from the other speakers today, and as Johnny, you've said the same, is that culture is a really big enabler or blocker if you get it wrong as well. So if you're not actively shaping that culture, then you're leaving the outcomes to chance. I often refer to it as about if I'm standing in front of a workshop, I call them the arms folded brigade. They're the ones that are sat there and the arms are folded and the brows furrowed, and they're looking at me thinking, what's she here to say now? And for me, it's about taking the people along the journey, because my win, and I say this a lot, but that feeling I get when I see the arms unfolding and the brows soften and people starting to lean into what's being said. If I could pay my mortgage, if I could bottle that and pay my mortgage with that feeling, I'd do all of what I do for free, because that's genuinely the bit that makes the difference. And touched on it already, but for me, the consistency matters as well. Because from a leading perspective, we want leaders and we need leaders to really say and show that same message consistently. It's that classic kind of leading from the front. But even when things get uncomfortable, so one of my team's got a sporting background, a professional sporting background, and he always says that a dressing room in a sporting environment is great. With the manager, it's all great when you're winning, but the trick of an amazing manager, an amazing leader, is when you're not winning. At that half-time post, when you come in, and actually you're 2-1 down in whatever game that you're playing, it's how to come back, and that resilience and the tenacity. And as John said, guess what? Not all change programs go perfectly. There's going to be dips. There's going to be issues. It's from a leader's perspective, how you manage that. And then finally, also, it's recognizing that change fatigue is real. It's there. It exists. As you say, Sarah, it's not just we're going to do a change program, the end, tick a box. We're better now, whatever better means. It's a continual evolution. So it's recognizing those small wins, celebrating the wins, demonstrating how far we're moving up that mountain, but also recognizing that sometimes we might have to take a step back down the mountain in order to take us back up again. So that honesty and transparency is really key for me.
I suppose, Kerry, as well, you talk about the arms folded brigade. Actually, those and the detractors are the ones you probably need to keep closest and work hardest on, because they are the ones who could otherwise negatively influence the outcome.
Oh, it really is. I often say that people say to me is that in the programs that I've worked on is how can you measure if the program's working, if it's all going in the right direction? And John said it already, success factors. We need to know what success looks like. We need to track those. We need to understand where we're starting from. All of those things are absolutely correct. However, it's also that if you could just hover around the coffee machine, and it's that conversation that people are having around the coffee machine, that's where you're building the advocates for the change. So that's where the people that are supportive of the change are going to be, it's the natural conversation, singing praises and those sorts of things. But also, you're right, Tim, it's where the potential damage can be done from detractors as well. So it's not about shooing those people off into a corner and hoping they quieten down. It's about listening. It's the classic, we were given kind of 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's to listen to those people, to listen to the fears. Some of them might be founded, some of the concerns, and we need to listen and understand those. However, we then also need to be able to address them. And as I say, for me, in the work that I do, again, that feeling that if I could bottle it would be turning the detractors into the advocates for the change, from the arms folded to the kind of the relaxed body language, and also engaging in my workshop. That's the win for me. And that's a really important part of any change program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kerry. Sarah, to you now, in terms of what are your thoughts on the techniques for managing the workforce through this? And as Kerry said, kind of encouraging those detractors and making sure that everybody comes on board.
I think there are 2 parts to this, to be honest. One is the almost process map to get from A to B. And then there's the taking the wild sheep along a road that you think you've got a start point and a middle point and an end point, and then find in reality that you've lost a few people or a few sheep on the way. So for me, the people element of it is hugely, hugely important. And I think there's a couple of things within this. If you've ever had shocks in your private life, there's all sorts of model curves that show you go into an element of perhaps shock, denial, then a bit of sort of, hit the bottom of the bucket in terms of how you're feeling. And then it's quite a journey before acceptance and reality of moving on. And I think actually sometimes as, owners, leaders, managers, heads of, we forget the kind of change model that happens for individuals on these journeys as well. So one of the things we should be, I think, cognizant of is the fact that we have very aging workforce in some areas of our industry, and we have a lot of young new talent or experienced and emerging talent coming through who all have different learning styles. They have different styles of appreciating communication and the way that we effectively take the kind of the transformational change that happens through systems, processes, or different measures in the business with actually the people. So I think communication has got to be adapted and adjusted to make sure that it works for all, and lots of chances for feedback and so on. So I think we're in complementary styles here, but actually provide a way for people to either be mentored or supported or encouraged as part of their development through the change for positive outcome.
Absolutely. And on the driving sheep analogy, Sarah, I guess there are different sheep that want to move at different paces, aren't they? So it's, as a leader, it's taking that into account and encouraging them in the best way.
Yes, I mean, I think anybody that's had, history or experience of change will know that the things that often catch you out aren't the things that you most expect sometimes. And quite often, if we don't provide that regular, what's in it for me? Why are we doing this? What's the clarity of purpose? What's the likely result? Why are we putting people through this? It's hugely important to give them the foresight. It's a bit like Covey says, and start with the end in mind. And I think that's very important for people.
Fantastic. John, coming to you, as Kerry said about hearing what people are saying when they're having a coffee together. You're a leader who is very visible in the business. I guess that's one of your strengths, do you think? And what do you say? What do you use as techniques for this?
Well, I don't want to come up with any more analogies. We've had sheep, elephants, and mountains, but the visibility is absolutely a point, because how do you know what is going on in your business? Best will in the world, you have outputs in terms of some of the information and measures that we have, but that doesn't tell you exactly what is going right or wrong in the businesses. And I did love that arms folded, and that's why sometimes it's better to come in the back door of a dealership rather than the front door. And actually you can tell, you can feel it, you can almost taste it when you come into a dealership and things aren't right. And you're right, it's the people not looking up, it's the people not wanting to make eye contact, and those are the ones you've got to go and talk to. And it is uncomfortable, but you've got to go and do it, and then you'll get to the root cause of what's actually not going right. So yeah, visibility is a hard one because we're all incredibly busy, but just going and spending some time with the folks is so important. That's where you'll get more of the buy-in. That's why they'll push on and maybe stay a little longer, work a little bit harder, or think a little bit more round about what they're doing. And that's everything round about culture and induction and communication. We're letting them know what's going to happen. We tell them where we are. And, there's some stuff that we do that might be old-fashioned. I do get challenged on in a digital world. Why are we still sending out staff updates in printed matter? But it works. They take it home. We can show, husbands and wives and, girlfriends, boyfriends, family that actually this is important. Those pictures, those names around the business. I guess the final part is to celebrate the wins. When you actually achieve it, celebrate it on the way through. We don't do enough of that. And I sometimes recognize it in myself. We're pushing so hard on looking at what's coming at us, and there's lots coming at us. We don't look how far we've traveled. There you go. There's the next analogy. We don't see how far we've come along the road. And even when things aren't going right, there'll always be reasons to be cheerful. There'll always be something you can celebrate. And that was one we picked up. It was during the 2008. There you go. There's a blast. There's a very long blast from the past. When we were sat, and it was bad news. There was a lot of bad news around and about us, but there was always one department that had sold. There's always one department that had innovated, one department that had done a little change that had delivered success. well, let's shout about it and help the others join in that success. So I think that celebration part is important as well.
Yeah. That reminds me, John, many years ago, one of our AM meetings, we had a former executive from John Lewis who talked about catching your people doing things right rather than catching them wrong.
Yeah.
And just that every little celebration just to lift the mood.
And I think people, you sometimes, I know we talk about money and promotion, and sometimes see those little things, those little thank yous, whether it be a note or just making sure that you mention them in the next meeting. Those are the little things that just make the difference, all the difference.
Axel, to you then, what do you see as kind of techniques and factors when guiding the workforce?
I think it might sound strange coming from a tech supplier, but I don't actually think, tech should be the change, but rather the solution. So there should already be a problem identified, and this is actually the solution or a way to essentially assist with it, right? And I think Sarah was also touching on a very good point, from a people, perspective. It's, what is the why? Why is this happening? And I think a lot of people just forget to mention that, or it just gets lost, but it really just helps just to understand, why am I doing this extra, or, what's my role in it? And understanding that from a personal perspective, I think can really, really, really do a lot.
Absolutely. So, Kerry, from your experience, are there any instances? Axel says again, kind of reiterating the why. What is the why? Can you share any examples of where you've had to help people understand why change is happening?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we recently ran a transformation sprint. So this is for a dealer group CEO and their leadership team. Was the starting point. So this CEO has got an amazing ambition. I often say that the bit where we come in and help is when there's a business which is ambition rich but time and or resource poor. So the dream is there, the desire is there. What we did is come in and was to then help to turn that ambition into a clear delivery path. Now, in reality, is between the CEO and myself, we could have sat in an enclosed room together and defined what that delivery plan was. I could have taken the ambition and I could have shaped it into a delivery plan and delivered it back and said, and as John has said, back to the analogy of there's your mountain, folks, let's get climbing. But instead what we did is that, and again, this approach that we have, we call it 3-2-1 strategy, because it's basically 3 days, two of us, my side, one strategic plan. But the key delivery here is that the workshops that we do together are collaborative workshops. So we're doing it with the CEO, and it was his entire leadership team as well. So everyone's involved in collaboratively building the plan. Now, I'm there and my team are there to challenge and to steer and direct, but ultimately it becomes a collective plan. So what that's doing is it's involving the senior leadership team at the beginning. So there was no earlier start points, involving people early. Don't just brief them on what the final output was, but then also give them the tools that they can then do the same to cascade down to their teams as well. So it's about providing, toolkits and visual aids, if you like, that they could then use in their morning meetings. So that we're not asking them to, here's our plan, folks. Can you go and create something in order to cascade this down in your morning meetings? Providing the materials for them. They're busy enough. They've got really important day jobs to be doing. So it was about arming them with as much as possible so that they could then just take that and take it forward. And back to that idea of, I completely agree, John, the celebrating the successes along the way are really important. And this isn't about kind of celebrating the success of carrying this Akeno team and their plan. It's not my plan. It's not our plan. It's the collective plan. It's celebrating the success of the business, but better still, the individuals within that business who are delivering along the way, because my success only comes if my clients are successful. So therefore, everyone who's part of that plan is really sort of part of that entire journey. So for me, that's again, it's a recent example where it started from the idea of, Kerry, can you help me create a delivery plan? Yes, I can. And I can do that myself, but let's approach this in a different way. And as I say, the outcome to all of that was a collaborative plan that everyone knew the why. We've talked about the why are we doing this, and then the how we're going to do it as well, how we're going to climb that mountain together.
Okay, thank you, Kerry.
With the sheep whilst eating an elephant.
Definitely. So, Sarah, do you have any examples that you can share from your experience of change management?
Yes, I think there are people that like to have the certainty that they come in and they know what's expected of them, and they work to a pattern of either they've got their objectives or they've got their KPIs and they're on track. And when, as a business, you then start to look at, are we heading in the right direction? Are we moving quickly enough? You know, the changes, even if you just take the political changes of the last sort of 48, 60 hours, we're seeing major change coming automotive way already. We've got the tariffs, we've got, you know, the announcements of the promises that have come in what we're going to be having to look at and do. And I think one of the big things is that we have to take people on that journey with us. And where we've just been involved in working on a project where we've rewritten what we think success looks like, we've had to actually basically tear up what we've done before and say, we're here today, but actually, where do we need to go tomorrow? And one of the strategies that we took to deal with that was to take the people through more time than you probably feel you've got to say, what are the blockers for us being able to do what we need to do in the future? So in a way, Tim, it's a bit like you've got current workforce mapping and then future state mapping. And you have to take people on a journey to show why we're making the changes in that. And that some of the things that we do today that can be easily replaced by technology or AI or chat box or online role plays through AI simulation, you've got to demonstrate to the people and do an element of over coaching and over supporting them to show that why you're making that change to their working practice, because you're actually alleviating them of some of the frustration. So you hear people regularly saying, I've got so much on and now there's another change. And I think if we do some future state mapping, whether that's for technology or whether that's for strategy or whether it's a new sales process that you want to go into, my experience has been, don't be short on the time you invest in talking, communicating, feeding back, and taking the intelligence and the working knowledge from those at the front end.
I think that's a key part as well, as you just mentioned, Sarah. Actually, you're employing brains in your business. You're just employing hands and mouths to sell, to service, and whatever. And actually use those brains, get everybody involved and collective. And you never know from the showroom floor. Advice, kind of feedback may come that actually tweaks and helps you tweak and shape your strategy, I suppose. So it's getting everybody involved in that way, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, naturally, my thread through all of this is the people side of it. And one of the things that I've learned very much with change management in numerous organizations is that people want answers. If you don't give clear information, people will speculate or they will have conspiracy theories. And so one of my things about any change management programs is invite questions, invite the opportunity for people to ask you stuff. If you don't know the answer, experienced leaders will tell them they don't know, but they'll come back to you, or this is the plan, we're going to work towards it, we're going to be flexible and adaptable, because all set programs don't usually go according to plan. A number of IT programs I've seen that have had enormous cost increases and delays. And the trick is make sure you bring your people with you. Don't alienate them.
Absolutely. You'd agree with that wholeheartedly, John, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would. Of course I would. And that time thing is, you are making a huge commitment. We do staff survey at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, and it's an engagement survey based. It's anonymous, where the questions come in, the comments can come in, and I can interact with every single passive or negative comment. That takes hours and days, but it means that anybody from the valeters all the way through to our general managers can make a comment that we will then pick up. So I think, we've spoken about visibility and we've spoken about communicate. You've got to give them an opportunity. You've got to give the teams the ability to be able to comment on the way through. I had started writing down just a few of some examples as I was listening, and there's just so many. And I was trying to, do we go for acquisitions, refurbs, COVID, for example? But agency, I guess, would be, you mentioned that at the beginning, Tim. And that was a huge transformation. That was a transformation where there was a lot of fear. But I think once we understood that it was arriving, it was then, okay, how do we get our business fit for that transformation? And that was a lot of time for myself and James Smullen, the FD, in terms of making sure that what we were signing up to was the very best it could be, but then actually actively being involved and engaged on the pilots round about the systems, all the way through to when we know it was going to launch, actually taking every single member of the sales execs, the administration teams, the management through, here's what to expect. And we knew it was going to be bumpy, and my God, it was bumpy. But I think it gave us an advantage because we'd forced in, and can I throw in another analogy?
Go for it.
You've got the cow versus the buffalo and the storm's approaching. You know that one? Where, the cows will, if the storm's coming in, the cows will start walking away from the rain and then running away. But it takes longer for the storm to pass over them, where the buffaloes turn round and they start running towards it. So it is quite hard, rain in their face, but they get through it quite quickly. So be more buffalo. How's that? Put that with the wild sheep and the elephant.
I love that, John. I've never heard that one before, but I like that.
That's an old nada. That's a nada one.
Axel, what examples can you give from your career history of change management activities and how they were achieved?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples. I think currently internally in our organization, we're implementing a new system, right? So this is actually I thought it was a perfect example. And it actually started because a few staff members actually started using this themselves just because they thought it would help and add efficiency to the way they would work. And it has indeed. And, kind of management kind of picked up on it, and they realized, well, this could be a great addition for everybody in the organization. And it's kind of been almost a grassroots movement. And I think it's pretty important, like you as a leader, just to kind of realize, what are my employees doing? And maybe there's actually some learnings for myself and stuff that I could bring and extend to the rest of the organization. I think it doesn't always have to be so top down. Sometimes the bottom up stuff can be just as powerful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess going back to Kerry, your sprints example kind of stuck with me, that actually as a leader, you may start with a plan, but actually the plan may change. You may adapt that, and the feedback from your entire workforce is useful for that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I always say that, again, whenever I'm putting a plan together for any project, is often it'll be, when's the plan finished? It's like the plan's never finished, because it should be continually evolving. It's a bit like when will digital transformation be finished? When will AI be finished? Never, because it needs to continually evolve, but also it needs to adapt. And you're right, Tim, some of those adaptations will be from understanding from ground level, as you say, Axel, sort of ground up, is going to be, what needs to adapt and what needs to evolve.
Certainly. So on to we get on to our last question, but there may be a minute for any questions submitted from the audience. If you'd like to submit them, then please do drop them in the Q&A box. But just interested in hearing from all our panelists, really, the kind of key piece of advice you would share for leaders in terms of spotting those necessary changes on the horizon, or even the trends. I mean, we talked before we went live, didn't we, about what's happening in America at the moment, which actually, yeah, go back a couple of years, we probably wouldn't have seen quite that much coming. But as leaders, how can you spot what is on the horizon? Kerry, again, we'll come to you first on that one.
Great, thanks, Tim. So for this one, I was trying to think of a top three, if you like. Then I got greedy and a fourth popped in and a fifth. And then just as we've been talking, I've added a sixth in as well. But I'll be quick, I promise. So the first one is around staying close to your operation. We've heard it already. Actually, you've just talked about it. So most of those missed opportunities come from understanding what's going on in the ground. I love what you said, John. Coming through the back door, not the front door, and see what's really going on. So I love that one. The other one really is around not chasing trends blindly. So, and in fact, I was talking about this just to one of our industry colleagues just a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about the importance of focusing on operational excellence first. You really need to get the fundamentals and the basics right before you start layering on innovation. Often it can be people can be too quick to think about the exciting things, the AI and the cool tech, but really we need to get that operational excellence first. The third one is around listening for friction. So back to that listening carefully piece again. So between teams, systems, customers, that's usually where the improvement and the opportunities lie. We've talked about it in spades, but number 4 for me is about building a culture that welcomes change, not just tolerates it. We don't want just to be dragging people up that mountain. We want people to be, striding up there. I'm going to continue with that analogy for you, John. And really, that's a business's edge in a volatile market. And then one that I'm really passionate about, and I've referenced it a few times in today's talk, is that don't mistake the digital tools as transformation. So the system itself won't necessarily fix what structures and behaviours are maybe undermining. So system is just one part of it. And the last one I added in just from today's conversation was comms and more comms. So as you say, John, is in whatever format. It can be a piece of paper, it can be an email, it can be a town hall, it can be all of the above. But communicate out, make it relevant to the audience you're communicating to, and do it often as well. Keep people abreast of what's going on.
People can never be informed enough, really, can they, Kerry?
Absolutely.
Sarah, to you, what's your piece of advice for leaders in terms of spotting what's on the horizon, how they can ensure they cope with it?
I think we've got, again, sort of different audiences within our workforce in terms of how ready they are for what's actually happening in live time now. If I asked John, who would have ever believed you could take your vehicle in for servicing and not see a human being? So, if you're a Tesla owner and you drop your vehicle off and it recognizes your vehicle and you pop your keys in a box and off you go and you get a message later. That would probably, for those of us that have been around many decades, not that I'm saying you're old, John, but we would not have envisaged that many years ago. So I think one of the big things about being prepared for the future is actually looking what's happened currently. Open your eyes, look at some parallel industries. You'll see a lot of what is the art of possible. And one of the things that I think is very healthy is to look at where we can use new ways of working, whether that is through technology, whether it's through AI, and get some of our basic administration, some of our basic business work done effectively and efficiently remotely, so that you free up the labour for where you get the competitive edge in your business against where you're trying to get to, because I think there is currently not enough focus on using people for the skills that people can bring and allowing basically systems, processes, technology, AI, digitalization, whatever, to do stuff that doesn't need as much human input. So let's get the priority, if you're trying to drive business growth, drive your business in any way forward, let's be realistic about what is actually in the market here and today and proven and tested.
It's the human to human that can provide the most value, really, isn't it, Sarah?
Absolutely, yeah.
John, your thoughts on spotting what's on the horizon and how to cope with it?
Well, I'm still shocked at how many years Sarah's saying I began the trade on the way through, and I still don't believe you should be able to get your car serviced without talking to a human. It's so important for many reasons, and that's just not the human interface, but actually it should be an experience. Otherwise, where do we end up? We're just anyway. That sounds like a whole nother webinar. The good news is you're probably preaching to the converted today, Tim, because the people listening in to this webinar are, I guess, looking out and seeking awareness of what's happening. And I guess as leaders, that's our job. We've got to be aware of what's happening in and around. And there's always going to be a sideswipe. We're always going to get hit somewhere or t'other. And it's actually understanding that, whether that's coming directly at us or it's going to come from the side, we've got to be aware. And we can only be aware by asking questions, understanding the changes in the market, understanding the changes in tech and in our industry, and going to places that are uncomfortable. And I've always had that view on a website, for example. Some of the people who control the budgets might absolutely not be the best people to talk around. Marketing can be such a black art, but I would apply that straight into AI. We've got to understand AI is coming. AI is here, but it's coming. Every business will be impacted by it. So we've got to engage and understand when it works for your business. And that might be now. That might have been 6 months ago, or it might be in 12, 18 months. Every business has got to understand that. And as I said, that's going to be uncomfortable for the leaders, and to make sure that actually you make your decision to jump at the right time, and do it in a way that we've spoken, at length about today.
Yeah, if you don't jump at all, then you miss a huge opportunity, really, don't you? So, sorry.
No, I was just going to say we're all moving forward. We've got to keep moving forward. Otherwise, everybody keeps moving round about you, and you're going backwards.
So, Axel, onto you then. Your advice for spotting what's on the horizon, obviously, and the sector that you're in. As I say, very fast moving sector. So yeah, interested in your thoughts really on that.
Extremely fast moving. I would say my advice would be to be as proactive as possible and not be reactive. And a lot of people find themselves falling into a reactive mindset. But being intentional with where you want to go and where you believe it can go. There's nothing wrong with failing. Just fail fast. If you make a decision, it's the wrong decision, move on. And I think it's all about learning and improving from that. And I mean, because I speak to a lot of people every day regarding this, I think, how can you be more proactive? There's a classic movie from 2008 starring Jim Carrey. It's called Yes Man. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's basically tasked with saying yes to everything for a year. And it's an interesting concept. I think you can apply it. Should I be saying no right now? Is there something that is there that could work for me, or I could utilize in a different way? And I think just having that mentality can often help a lot with predicting where things are going and getting ahead of it in real time.
Be open and curious. Sounds very, very apt. Excellent, thank you. I'm conscious that we've gone a couple of minutes over our allotted time. But I think we will wrap up there. Thank you so much to our panelists today, Sarah, Kerry, Axel, and John. Some really useful insights from this webinar. Viewers, if you want to watch it again at any point, there'll be a recording link sent out later today. Before we log off, just a little reminder, next month's editorial webinar is talking about the workshop of the future. Ties in a little bit to what you were just saying there, John, but it will be on May the 8th, and registration for that one is now open. So again, thank you all for your participation today, panelists. Thank you, audience, for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.